Imagine this. It's 2 a.m. and you're standing alone on a deserted road near a graveyard. The dense fog surrounds you, making everything look eerie and obscure. The road is empty and you can't see anything beyond a few feet. Suddenly, a bus appears in the distance. It's the last bus of the night, the only means of getting home. Most people would board the bus without hesitation, right? But what if you knew that this bus wouldn't take you home? Instead, it's destined for a place that will send shivers down your spine. A place filled with events so terrifying, you wouldn't even want to imagine them. This isn't just a figment of imagination. A passenger in China lived through something very similar. There are moments in life when your instincts must guide you, because sometimes your decisions can place your life in grave danger or save it. The story I'm about to tell you is one of those terrifying tales. It's so horrifying that when you hear it, you'll find yourself wondering, what would I have done if I were in that situation? It's the tale of a bus, its passengers, and a mystery so chilling that it remains unsolved to this day. This is the biggest mysterious horror story of this planet. But before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you love horror, mystery, and historical tales. Now let's begin. The story takes place in China, and it revolves around a bus route numbered 375. This bus travels between Yuanmingyuan and the Fragrant Hills. The distance between these two places is hardly 16 kilometers. It's just a regular bus like any other that typically takes people home after a long day. However, this bus operates late at night, catering to those who work night shifts. On the night of November 14, 1995, the bus was on its usual route. At one point, it stopped at a place called Summer Palace, where 4 passengers were waiting. Among them was a couple, an elderly woman and a young man around 22 years old. They boarded the bus and noticed that there were only 2 people already inside, the bus driver and the conductor. The couple sat behind the driver, while the elderly woman and the young man sat opposite each other. It was after 2 a.m. by now, and this was the last trip of the bus for the night, after which it would return to the depot. The fog was so thick that even with the headlights on, the driver could barely see anything ahead. The visibility was almost zero, and the chances of an accident were high. The driver suggested that they take an alternate route, and both the elderly woman and the young man agreed. However, the couple sitting behind the driver refused, saying that their home was just a minute away, and they would rather get off at the next stop. Reluctantly, the driver continued on the original route. The bus continued on the deserted road, surrounded by dense forests and complete silence. The only sound was that of the bus's engine. Since no one knew each other, the passengers didn't talk to one another. The elderly woman tried to pass the time by looking out of the window, enjoying the cold breeze. Suddenly, the driver slammed on the brakes. The young man, startled, asked the driver why he had stopped in such a desolate place. The driver pointed out that there were 3 people standing in the middle of the road, signaling the bus to stop. The 3 people boarded the bus, and everyone inside was immediately on edge. There was nothing particularly wrong with them, but they were dressed in old, worn-out clothes, reminiscent of those worn during the times of kings and emperors. Their clothes were so filthy that it seemed as though they hadn't been washed in years. The most unsettling thing, however, was the middle person, whose hands were resting on the shoulders of the other 2 as if they were supporting him. It appeared as though the middle person was drunk, and the other 2 were helping him stand. But why were their clothes so different? The elderly woman felt uneasy as soon as the 3 passengers boarded the bus. She told the conductor that something wasn't right about them, that she had a bad feeling. The conductor tried to calm her down, suggesting that these 3 people might be actors from a nearby theater, which seemed plausible to the young man. But the elderly woman was not convinced. She thought, if they were really from a theater, why didn't they say something themselves instead of letting the conductor reassure us? And if the middle one was drunk, why were his hair covering his entire face? These questions swirled in the elderly woman's mind, and she kept a close watch on the 3 newcomers. Meanwhile, the bus had almost reached its destination, Fragrant Hills. They were back on the original route after taking a detour. It was late and the silence in the bus was deafening. The driver was struggling to stay awake when he suddenly saw a black cat cross the road. He hit the brakes hard. The elderly woman was thrown forward, landing on the young man. "Are you okay?" the young man asked. The elderly woman nodded silently and returned to her seat. After a while, she stood up and started screaming that her purse was missing. She accused the young man sitting across from her of stealing it when the bus jerked to a stop. The young man was shocked and denied the accusation, offering to let her search him. But the elderly woman wouldn't listen. She was adamant that he had stolen her purse. The situation escalated, and the driver and conductor suggested that they both get off the bus and sort it out at a nearby police station. As the elderly woman and the young man were about to get off the bus, the elderly woman noticed something. The middle passenger with the old clothes, who had his hair covering his face, was laughing silently. She quickly pulled the young man off the bus, and they both stood outside. The young man was terrified, thinking that he was about to be arrested. But the elderly woman looked strangely calm, as if a huge burden had been lifted off her shoulders. "Why did you do that?" the young man asked, still shaken. The elderly woman calmly replied, "You should be thanking me, I just saved your life." The young man was confused, so the elderly woman explained, "When those 3 people boarded the bus, I noticed something was off. Their presence felt wrong, like something negative surrounded them. I kept watching them out of the corner of my eye. And then, when a gust of wind blew, I saw something that terrified me. The person in the middle didn't have a face. He was a faceless ghost. If someone doesn't have a face, they're not human. There's something paranormal. And when I looked down at their feet, I realized that none of them had feet. Before they could do anything to us, I had to create a scene to get us off that bus. Staying there would have been like inviting death." The young man was horrified by what he heard. He hugged the elderly woman, grateful for what she had done. Then he suggested that they should report this to the police, as the driver and conductor were still in danger. They rushed to the nearest police station and explained everything. But as is often the case with horror stories, the police didn't take them seriously. They dismissed their concerns, leaving the elderly woman and the young man with no choice but to leave, thinking that the driver and conductor were beyond saving. But the horror of the story doesn't end there. The next day, November 15th, 1995, the police started searching for the missing bus. It had set off on its route the previous night, but never reached its destination. The police remembered the elderly woman and the young man's story and checked the CCTV footage. They found the bus captured at the place where the elderly woman and the young man had gotten off. But after that, the bus seemed to vanish. It wasn't seen on any other cameras, as if it had disappeared into thin air. For an entire day, the police searched for the missing bus but found nothing. The following day, they finally discovered the bus, but it was nowhere near Fragrant Hills. The bus was found submerged in a river over 100 kilometers away from its route. The police rushed to the scene and were shocked by what they found inside the bus. There were 3 bodies: the bus driver, the conductor, and the man who had been sitting between the 2 others, wearing those old, dirty clothes. The most shocking part was that the bodies were heavily decomposed, almost unrecognizable, despite the fact that they had only been dead for 2 days. How could bodies decompose so quickly, especially underwater? Even more mysterious was how the bus had traveled over 100 kilometers away from its route, without any fuel left in the tank. When the police opened the petrol tank, they found it completely empty, except for traces of blood. To this day, no one has been able to explain the mystery of that bus, the rapid decomposition of the bodies, or how it ended up so far from its intended destination. This story remains one of the most chilling and unsolved mysteries of all time. That concludes this terrifying tale. Remember, sometimes your instincts might save your life, just like they did for that elderly woman and the young man. But not everyone is so lucky.